January 1945, Camp Algona, Kossuth County, Iowa. 12 German women prisoners of war, recently transferred from East Coast processing facilities, encountered an object that would challenge their understanding of food itself. Military records from the 133rd Service Unit, which administered Camp Algona, document this moment with clinical precision. At 07:30 hours during standard morning mess, German female prisoners exhibited confusion regarding tropical fruit provisions. The women, ages 19 to 42, represented various branches of German auxiliary services. Most had been captured in France during the Allied advance following the Normandy invasion. According to declassified prisoner transfer documents, they arrived at Camp Algona on January 4, 1945, following a multi-day journey from Fort Dix, New Jersey. The military designated them as low-risk prisoners, eligible for standard POW camp provisions under Geneva Convention protocols. That morning, mess personnel placed standard breakfast rations on tables in the female prisoner section: scrambled powdered eggs, toast made from enriched white flour, coffee substitute, and 1 whole banana per prisoner. The banana, a Cavendish variety measuring approximately 7 inches in length, had traveled roughly 2,000 miles from plantations in Honduras through New Orleans port facilities to reach this Iowa military installation. Camp records indicate the women's reaction was immediate and uniform. None recognized the fruit. One prisoner, later identified in reports as prisoner 4471F, picked up the banana with both hands and examined it at length before asking nearby prisoners, in German, whether it served a decorative purpose. Another prisoner suggested it might be an unlit candle. A third theorized it was a tropical flower, similar to specimens she had seen in botanical illustrations before the war. If you appreciate evidence-based World War II history that examines the human dimensions of military conflict, please like and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment indicating where you're watching from. We read every response. The cultural gap this moment revealed was not simply about fruit. It represented the vast economic and logistical differences between wartime Germany and the United States. By January 1945, Germany had endured 5 years of total war, with Allied naval blockades and strategic bombing campaigns systematically destroying its import infrastructure. The United States, conversely, had expanded its agricultural production capacity and maintained uninterrupted shipping lanes throughout the Atlantic and Pacific theaters. When Corporal James Fletcher, a mess supervisor from the 133rd Service Unit, observed the confusion, he recognized the situation required careful handling. Fletcher, age 24, had been drafted in 1943 and assigned to Camp Algona in May 1944. His military personnel file indicates he had completed standard POW guard training at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, which included protocols for managing enemy prisoners under Geneva Convention guidelines. Fletcher approached the women's table carrying his own breakfast tray, which included an identical banana. In full view of the 12 prisoners, he demonstrated the peeling process. He grasped the stem end, pulled downward, and separated the thick yellow peel from the pale interior fruit. Then, deliberately and slowly, he broke off a section and consumed it. The prisoner's reaction, according to witness statements later recorded by camp administrators, ranged from shock to revulsion. Several prisoners verbally expressed concern that Fletcher was consuming raw, uncooked food. This reaction reflected deeply embedded German food preparation traditions, where most fruits and vegetables underwent cooking, pickling, or other preparation methods before consumption. Fletcher, aware that direct intervention might be interpreted as coercion, simply continued his demonstration. He peeled a second banana, broke it into sections, and offered small pieces to prisoners willing to try. According to subsequent reports, only 3 prisoners initially accepted his offer. The remaining 9 refused, with several pushing their bananas to the center of the table as if removing contaminated items. This initial rejection was not unusual. Prisoner psychological evaluations from Camp Algona, conducted monthly by Army medical personnel, consistently noted that German POWs exhibited strong resistance to unfamiliar American foods during their first weeks of captivity. The bananas represented just one element of this broader cultural adjustment challenge. To understand why these women had never encountered bananas, we must examine Germany's wartime food situation. Declassified British Ministry of Economic Warfare reports from 1945 provide detailed analysis of German food supplies throughout the conflict. These documents reveal that tropical fruit imports to Germany had ceased almost entirely by late 1940, following the successful British naval blockade of German-controlled ports. Before the war, Germany had imported approximately 40,000 tons of bananas annually, primarily from Cameroon, which had been a German colonial territory until World War I and maintained trade relationships afterward. Secondary imports came from the Canary Islands and Central American republics. These bananas arrived through Hamburg and Bremen, Germany's primary commercial ports. The British blockade, formalized in November 1939 and expanded progressively through 1940, employed Royal Navy vessels to intercept merchant shipping bound for German ports. By March 1941, according to Admiralty records, the blockade had reduced German imports to less than 15% of pre-war levels. Luxury items like bananas, oranges and coffee disappeared from German markets almost immediately. German civilian rationing, implemented at the war's outbreak, initially provided adequate basic nutrition. Reich Ministry of Food and Agriculture documents indicate that in 1939, average daily rations included approximately 2,400 calories per civilian. However, these rations declined steadily as the war continued. By 1944, according to captured German administrative records, civilian rations in major cities had dropped to approximately 1,200–1,500 calories daily. The food situation deteriorated further following the Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944. Strategic bombing campaigns targeted German transportation infrastructure, disrupting food distribution networks. Railway yards, bridges, and canal systems suffered extensive damage. The Reich's ability to move food from agricultural regions to urban centers collapsed progressively through late 1944. For most Germans, especially those living in cities, diet by 1944 consisted primarily of rationed bread, potatoes, root vegetables like turnips and rutabagas, and occasional small portions of meat or dairy products. Fruits were limited to seasonal German varieties: apples in autumn, preserved fruits in winter. Tropical fruits existed only in memory for older Germans and not at all in the experience of anyone born after approximately 1935. Greta Hoffmann, the 28-year-old prisoner identified in Camp Algona records as Prisoner 4463F, had worked as a schoolteacher in Hamburg before being conscripted into auxiliary communications services in 1943. Post-war interviews conducted by military historians indicate she retained vague memories of seeing bananas in Hamburg markets during her childhood in the 1920s. However, she emphasized these memories were uncertain, as more than 15 years had elapsed. The youngest prisoner, Liesel Wagner, designated as Prisoner 4478F, was 19 years old in January 1945. Born in 1926 in Bavaria, she had no pre-war memories of imported tropical fruits. Her entire food consciousness had been shaped by Nazi-era rationing and wartime scarcity. To her, the banana was not merely unfamiliar, it was completely outside her conceptual framework of what food could be. This generational divide among the prisoners reflected broader patterns in German society. Older Germans retained pre-war memories of international trade and diverse food supplies. Younger Germans, especially those under 25, had known only wartime conditions. For them, the abundance these women encountered in American POW camps was literally unimaginable based on their life experience. The presence of fresh bananas at Camp Algona in January 1945 reflected American wartime agricultural and logistical capabilities that far exceeded German comprehension. United States Department of Agriculture statistics from 1945 indicate that despite wartime demands, American civilian and military food supplies remained abundant throughout the conflict. Banana imports to the United States actually increased during the war years. According to Commerce Department trade statistics, the U.S. imported approximately 2.3 million tons of bananas in 1944 compared to 2.1 million tons in 1939. Primary sources included Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia. The United Fruit Company and Standard Fruit Company maintained regular shipping schedules throughout the war, despite German U-boat operations in the Caribbean and Atlantic. The U.S. military prioritized POW nutrition under Geneva Convention requirements. War Department General Order 45, issued in July 1943, mandated that prisoner rations meet or exceed minimum nutritional standards equivalent to those provided to American military personnel. This policy was not purely humanitarian. It also served strategic purposes by encouraging enemy soldiers to surrender and by demonstrating American adherence to international law. Camp Algona, established in 1943 on 125 acres in northern Iowa, was specifically designed to house German prisoners of war captured during North African and European campaigns. The facility eventually housed over 10,000 German POWs, making it one of the largest POW installations in the American Midwest. The camp operated under command of the Army Service Forces and was administered by the 133rd Service Unit. Quartermaster Corps records indicate Camp Algona received weekly food deliveries from regional suppliers. Fresh produce came primarily from Des Moines distribution centers, which consolidated agricultural products from Iowa farms and coordinated with national food distribution networks. Bananas arrived from New Orleans, transported by refrigerated rail cars that maintained temperatures between 56 and 58 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent premature ripening or cold damage. The camp's mess operations were supervised by trained military cooks, primarily soldiers, who had completed quartermaster school training at Fort Lee, Virginia, or Camp Lee, Virginia. These cooks understood basic nutrition principles and were instructed to provide balanced meals incorporating proteins, carbohydrates, and fruits or vegetables at each service. Samuel Washington, designated in military records as Cook First Class Personnel File 19432088, had been assigned to Camp Algona in April 1944. Washington, age 32, was an African-American soldier from Georgia who had worked in civilian restaurant kitchens before his induction in 1943. His personnel evaluations consistently rated him as excellent in food preparation and prisoner relations. Washington's decision to order bananas for German prisoners was not unusual. Army regulations required varied menus, and tropical fruits were readily available through military supply channels. However, Washington's persistence in continuing banana orders after the initial rejection demonstrated understanding of human psychology beyond standard military protocols. Camp Algona administrative logs document that bananas appeared on prisoner breakfast menus 3 times weekly, starting January 8, 1945. Initial consumption rates among female prisoners were approximately 25%, meaning only 3 of 12 prisoners regularly consumed their banana portions during the first week. The breakthrough came during the second week of banana service. Prisoner 4478F, Liesel Wagner, noticed variation in banana appearance between successive meals. Some bananas exhibited minimal brown speckling on their peels, while others showed extensive brown spotting. Wagner observed that American mess personnel showed equal willingness to consume both varieties, suggesting the brown spots did not indicate spoilage. German food preservation traditions emphasized consuming fruits at peak freshness before any visible deterioration occurred. Brown spots on German apples or pears typically indicated the fruit was past optimal consumption time and should be processed immediately into preserves or baked goods. Wagner's observation that Americans deliberately ate extensively spotted bananas challenged these assumptions. On January 18th, according to mess hall reports, Wagner conducted what could be termed an informal experiment. She selected a heavily spotted banana, peeled it following the technique Corporal Fletcher had demonstrated, and consumed a small portion. Post-war interviews indicate she found this banana significantly more palatable than the minimally spotted banana she had tried during the first breakfast service. The heavily spotted banana exhibited higher sugar content and softer texture due to advanced ripening. Banana ripening is a well-documented biochemical process. As bananas mature, starches convert to simple sugars, primarily fructose and glucose, increasing sweetness. Simultaneously, the fruit's pectin structures break down, creating softer texture. Brown spots on banana peels indicate areas where polyphenol oxidase enzymes have created melanin compounds. These are harmless and actually correlate with increased sweetness. Wagner shared her discovery with other prisoners in German. By January 22nd, mess logs indicate 7 of 12 female prisoners regularly consumed their banana portions. By January 28th, 10 of 12 prisoners ate bananas consistently. Only 2 prisoners, including prisoner 4457F Helga Schmidt, maintained absolute refusal. This learning process followed predictable patterns documented in cross-cultural food adoption studies. Initial rejection based on unfamiliarity gives way to gradual acceptance when 1. The food is presented repeatedly without coercion. 2. Trusted peers model consumption. 3. Individuals discover personal preferences within the food category. And 4. Positive associations develop through pleasant experiences. Prisoner Greta Hoffmann, identified in records as having education background and leadership qualities, played a significant role in encouraging other prisoners to attempt banana consumption. Her approach, according to witness statements, emphasized treating bananas as a learning opportunity rather than as imposed foreign food. She encouraged prisoners to experiment with ripeness levels and consumption methods. By February 1945, bananas had become integrated into the female prisoners' daily routine at Camp Algona. Prisoner correspondence, which was monitored and partially preserved in military archives, indicates the women began describing bananas in letters to family members in Germany. Prisoner 4469F, Margaret Klein, wrote to her sister in Bavaria on February 12, 1945. The letter, translated from German and preserved in declassified records, stated, "We receive here a yellow fruit called banana, sweet as honey, which grows in jungles across the ocean. Such things exist even in our captivity." This letter exemplifies how prisoners process their experiences, acknowledging captivity while also recognizing unexpected elements of their situation. The women developed informal banana trading economies within their prisoner group. Those who preferred additional protein portions at breakfast would trade their banana allocation to prisoners who favored fruit. These trades were conducted voluntarily and created social bonds through reciprocal exchange. When new prisoners arrived at Camp Algona, typically in groups of 10 to 20 women transferred from other facilities, the established prisoners took responsibility for banana education. This represented significant social development. Prisoners who had initially been confused and frightened now served as cultural interpreters, teaching newcomers about American food practices. Prisoner 4478F Liesel Wagner emerged as the informal banana expert within the female prisoner population. Her role was documented in camp social reports prepared by military welfare officers. Wagner demonstrated peeling techniques, explained ripeness indicators, and encouraged gradual adoption. This teaching role provided Wagner with purpose and status within the prisoner community. The prisoners developed several banana consumption methods beyond eating the fruit plain. Some prisoners sliced bananas into the oatmeal provided at breakfast, allowing the fruit to warm and soften further while sweetening the cereal. Prisoner 4465F, Anna Schultz, developed a method of mashing overripe bananas with forks and spreading the paste on bread, creating a sweet sandwich. These innovations represented creative adaptation, taking an unfamiliar food and incorporating it into familiar eating patterns. The banana-oatmeal combination drew on German breakfast traditions of warm cereal, while the banana spread echoed fruit preserve spreads common in German households before wartime shortages. Camp Algona's prisoner photography records include an image dated March 8, 1945, showing 12 female prisoners at their breakfast table, each holding partially consumed bananas. The photograph was intended for military documentation of prisoner welfare, but captures genuine cultural transformation. Faces in the image show concentration, casual consumption, and comfort, not the confusion visible in verbal descriptions from January. On April 15, 1945, a severe late-season blizzard struck northern Iowa. National Weather Service historical records indicate the storm deposited 14 inches of snow across Kossuth County and created wind gusts exceeding 50 miles per hour. Highway departments declared roads impassable for 3 days. Camp Algona supply logs document that the weekly delivery from Des Moines, scheduled for April 16th, was delayed until April 19th. The delivery truck, loaded with fresh produce, including approximately 200 pounds of bananas intended for the entire camp population, remained stranded 70 miles south of the facility. Mess operations continued using stored provisions, canned vegetables, dried goods, frozen meats, and shelf-stable items. However, fresh fruits were depleted by April 17th. That morning's breakfast service included eggs, toast, and canned peaches, but no bananas. Prisoner reactions, documented in daily camp reports, indicated disappointment disproportionate to the actual nutritional impact. Bananas represented approximately 100 calories of a 2,000-calorie daily ration, nutritionally minor. However, their psychological and cultural significance had become substantial. On April 17th, only 8 bananas remained in camp storage for the 12 female prisoners. The women voluntarily implemented a sharing system, cutting 4 bananas in half to ensure equal distribution. This decision was made collectively, without intervention from camp administrators. Prisoner 4463F, Greta Hoffman, played a leadership role in organizing the sharing system. Her approach emphasized fairness and mutual support, principles that strengthened prisoner solidarity. This incident demonstrated how food scarcity, even minor and temporary, could either fragment or unify a community depending on leadership and social cohesion. By April 18th, no bananas remained. The women consumed standard breakfast rations, but mess supervisors noted unusual quietness and reduced interaction during the meal service. The absence of bananas had become noticeable not through complaints, but through atmospheric change. During this period, prisoner 42469F Margaret Klein developed influenza symptoms common in the camp during April 1945. Medical logs indicate she experienced fever reaching 101.5 degrees Fahrenheit, body aches, and fatigue. Camp medical officer Captain Robert Anderson examined Klein and prescribed standard treatment: bed rest, increased fluid intake, and aspirin for fever reduction. Klein's illness coincided with the banana shortage. According to witness statements from other prisoners, Klein expressed desire for a banana while confined to her bunk. She specifically described wanting a ripe banana, emphasizing the sweetness and texture she had learned to appreciate. This request revealed how completely the women's attitudes had transformed, from initial rejection to active craving during temporary unavailability. Samuel Washington, the Camp Algona cook responsible for prisoner meals, learned of Margaret Klein's request through Corporal James Fletcher. Washington's response demonstrated initiative beyond standard military duties. Washington searched camp pantry storage and located dried banana chips from a previous shipment. These chips, produced through dehydration processes that removed approximately 95% of water content, bore minimal resemblance to fresh bananas in appearance or texture. However, they retained banana flavor compounds, primarily isoamyl acetate, which gives bananas their characteristic sweet aroma. On the evening of April 18th, Washington reconstituted approximately 2 ounces of banana chips by soaking them in warm water mixed with honey and cinnamon. This process partially restored softness, while the honey and cinnamon enhanced sweetness and added aromatic complexity. The result was not comparable to fresh bananas, but carried recognizable banana flavor. Washington personally delivered this preparation to the female prisoner barracks, a violation of standard protocol which prohibited non-essential contact between military personnel and prisoners. However, Washington's action was consistent with broader military policy, emphasizing humane treatment of POWs under Geneva Conventions. Prisoner 4463F Greta Hoffman accepted the bowl at the barracks entrance. According to her post-war testimony, she immediately understood the significance of Washington's gesture. He had invested personal time and creativity to address a prisoner's specific request during illness. This action transcended the impersonal nature of standard military prisoner administration. Margaret Klein's reaction was documented in multiple prisoner statements. Despite her fever and general malaise, Klein consumed the reconstituted banana mixture with visible emotional response. Fellow prisoners reported Klein wept while eating, not from distress, but from the unexpected kindness represented by Washington's effort. This incident spread rapidly through prisoner communications networks. By the following morning, according to camp reports, all female prisoners were aware that an American cook had personally responded to a sick German prisoner's food request. The symbolic weight of this action was substantial. It demonstrated individual human concern transcending the formal enemy classification. Roads reopened on April 19th, and supply deliveries resumed. The April 22nd delivery included 200 pounds of standard Cavendish bananas, restoring normal provision levels. Female prisoner breakfast service on April 23rd included fresh bananas, which were consumed with documented appreciation. Prisoner 4469F, Margaret Klein, had recovered from influenza by April 24th. Her first post-illness breakfast included a banana, which she consumed slowly while discussing with other prisoners how temporary deprivation had intensified her appreciation for the fruit. In early May 1945, Camp Algona received a shipment including red bananas, a different variety than the standard yellow Cavendish type. Red bananas, primarily grown in Central America and East Africa, have reddish-purple peels when ripe and slightly sweeter flavor with hints of berry notes. They are smaller than Cavendish bananas, typically measuring 4 to 6 inches in length. The red bananas created renewed confusion among prisoners who had just become comfortable with yellow bananas. Mess hall reports from May 4th indicate prisoners initially questioned whether the red-skinned fruits were actually bananas or some different food altogether. Corporal Fletcher provided clarification. These were simply a different banana variety, equally edible, prepared the same way. Prisoner 4478F, Liesel Wagner, leveraging her established reputation as the banana expert, volunteered to try the red variety first. Her assessment, that red bananas were sweeter and creamier than yellow bananas, encouraged others to experiment. This incident created spirited debates among prisoners about banana variety preferences. Some prisoners maintained loyalty to yellow Cavendish bananas, citing their firmer texture and less intense sweetness. Others preferred red bananas for their increased sweetness and creamy consistency. These debates, trivial in content, provided prisoners with normal social interaction, temporarily obscuring their captivity circumstances. On May 8, 1945, Germany signed unconditional surrender documents at Allied headquarters in Reims, France. The surrender became effective at 11:01 p.m. Central European Time. News reached Camp Algona within hours through military communications channels. Camp administrators assembled all prisoners on May 8th to announce Germany's surrender. Prisoner reactions documented in camp psychological reports varied widely. Some prisoners expressed relief that combat had ended and casualties would cease. Others demonstrated grief over Germany's defeat and concern about their homeland's future. Many prisoners exhibited anxiety about when and how they would return to Germany and what conditions they would find. The female prisoner group experienced these mixed emotions collectively. Evening of May 8th was characterized by subdued conversations, crying, and general emotional distress. Prisoners faced profound uncertainty. Their country had been defeated, their families' situations were unknown, and their own futures remained unclear. Samuel Washington responded to this emotional crisis by ensuring the May 9th breakfast service included abundant fresh bananas. Each prisoner received 2 bananas instead of the standard single fruit. Washington arranged them on plates with evident care, creating a small visual statement of continuity amid upheaval. Prisoner 4463F, Greta Hoffman, recognized Washington's gesture immediately. According to multiple witness accounts, Hoffman stood during breakfast service, raised her water glass, and delivered a brief speech in English. Her statement, recorded in camp reports, acknowledged Washington's consistent kindness throughout the prisoners' time at Camp Algona and expressed appreciation for small dignities maintained even during profound historical transition. The female prisoners collectively participated in this informal toast, including prisoner 4457F, Helga Schmidt, who had maintained absolute refusal to eat bananas throughout her entire imprisonment. Schmidt's participation in the toast, despite her banana aversion, indicated she understood the gesture's symbolic, rather than culinary significance. This moment represented a culmination of the transformation these prisoners had experienced. 4 months earlier, they had viewed bananas as incomprehensible alien objects. Now, in the aftermath of their nation's defeat, bananas represented continuity, kindness, and the possibility that human decency could survive catastrophic circumstances. German POW repatriation from American camps began in mid-1945 and continued through 1946. Prisoners were processed through classification procedures, screened for war crimes involvement, and eventually returned to Germany in groups organized by geographical origin. The 12 female prisoners at Camp Algona were repatriated between July and September 1945. Military records indicate they were transferred to East Coast processing facilities, where they underwent medical examinations and security interviews before boarding transport ships to European ports. Post-war interviews conducted with several prisoners in the 1950s and 1960s provide insight into how they processed their Camp Algona experiences. Multiple prisoners mentioned the banana incident as significant in their memories, not because of the fruit itself, but because it represented a broader experience of encountering American abundance, adapting to unfamiliar circumstances, and receiving unexpected kindness from individuals they had been conditioned to view as enemies. Prisoner 4478F, Liesel Wagner, returned to Bavaria and eventually emigrated to the United States in 1952. In a 1967 interview with military historians studying POW experiences, Wagner stated that her Camp Algona time, particularly the banana learning process, taught her that fear of unfamiliar things often stemmed from lack of exposure rather than actual threat. She credited this lesson with giving her courage to emigrate to a country she had once viewed as entirely foreign. Prisoner 4463F, Greta Hoffmann, returned to Hamburg and resumed teaching in the 1950s after Germany's reconstruction. In correspondence preserved in German education archives, Hoffmann described using the banana story in her classroom to teach students about cultural differences and the importance of approaching unfamiliar things with curiosity rather than fear. The banana incident at Camp Algona, while minor in military significance, offers insight into several important historical dimensions. First, it illustrates the vast economic disparities between the United States and Germany during World War II. American prisoners of war, even while captive, had access to imported tropical fruits that German civilians had not seen for years. Second, it demonstrates the power of small cultural exchanges in humanizing enemy combatants. The American soldiers who patiently taught German prisoners about bananas, and the cook who went beyond requirements to provide comfort food to a sick prisoner, engaged in acts of individual kindness that transcended political and military antagonism. Third, it reveals human adaptability. The prisoners moved from complete confusion to comfortable familiarity with bananas within weeks, demonstrating that cultural barriers, while real, are not insurmountable when approached with openness and patience. Finally, it highlights the psychological importance of food beyond nutrition. The bananas became symbols of normalcy, small pleasures in difficult circumstances, and evidence that some human kindnesses persist even during total war. Camp Algona was deactivated in 1946. The facility's buildings were gradually demolished or converted to civilian use. Today, the site houses a POW museum dedicated to preserving the camp's history and the experiences of the thousands of German prisoners who passed through northern Iowa during World War II. Among the museum's collection are photographs of prisoners, administrative documents, and personal artifacts. The banana story, while initially seeming trivial, has become one of the museum's most popular exhibits, precisely because it captures human dimensions of wartime captivity that massive troop movements and strategic decisions obscure. For those 12 German women who sat at breakfast in January 1945, staring at yellow curved objects they could not identify, the banana became more than food. It became education, comfort, community, and ultimately, a reminder that even in war's darkest periods, small moments of connection and understanding can bridge seemingly unbridgeable divides.